I'm joined by Noah Rothman. He's an editor at Mediaite. So, Noah, before the new year, we were talking about this shift that's taken place in kind of generic 2014 election polling. It was favoring Democrats shortly after the Republican government shut down in October, swinging back in favor of Republicans more recently. Now that it's 2014 and it is officially election year, let's talk first about motives for the swing. What's your thought as to what has pushed these generic polls back in favor of Republicans?
It's entirely the Affordable Care Act's rollout. I don't think there's any analyst that would dispute that. And actually, the shift towards Democrats in October, we saw a massive shift towards Democrats in the generic polling, generic ballot question, and that was entirely to do with the government shutdown. So there really has been only two issues that has moved the generic ballot, and frankly, it's moved the generic ballot a lot, signifying that there is a significant amount of interest in control of Congress, A, among the voting public, and B, that it's very volatile. We saw a 13-point shift in CNN public opinion research polling from Democrats to Republicans. Right now, the GOP holds a 5-point lead in the CNN generic ballot. The Democrats held an 8-point lead in October. So again, very much in flux. Things are going to change probably dramatically over the course of 2014, and I would anticipate a lot of back and forth like we're seeing now, because the only thing that's structurally significant is the fact that the ACA rollout will continue to improve, but many analysts predict that the fundamental assumptions within the law are going to be challenged, and many more dramatic changes in America's healthcare delivery system as a result of the law are going to take place in 2014. So Republicans hope to keep that message on the front burner. They don't want to jeopardize anything that has to do with keeping the public's attention on the ACA roll. And that could actually benefit Democrats a little bit because they may end up persuading Republicans to support things like an increase in the minimum wage just to keep the attention on the Affordable Care Act and not changing the implementation of that in a significant way to alter the generic ballot question.
Well, it's good for Republicans to keep it in people's minds until favorability starts increasing, which I think is the biggest fear of Republicans. I think Republicans for years have known that the window during which they can really try to catalyze people to oppose the Affordable Care Act is before it's fully implemented. Because when you look at polling on the specific tenets of the Affordable Care Act, which I believe is not nearly liberal enough, but my personal opinion aside, people like what is in the Affordable Care Act. When you ask people, do you think the government should guarantee everybody has some minimum level of care regardless of their ability to pay? Overwhelmingly, Americans support that by something like 2/3 to 80%. However, there's been so much bad press around the Affordable Care Act, and the rollout has been riddled with these website problems that I think that the fundamentals are being lost for this kind of PR charade.
Well, you touch on a good point, which is that the philosophical question, the broad overarching philosophical question, does the government have some responsibility to provide health coverage, healthcare access to people who can't afford it? That question has been litigated over the course of the last 5 years, this ACA debate, and Democrats won. They have absolutely persuaded the public that the federal government does have some role to play in providing healthcare delivery for people who can't otherwise afford it. That said, and that does poll well, that having been said, we're about to hit where the rubber meets the road. And that comes in the form of how many people are quote unquote losers as a result of this law. The law's ability to deliver access to healthcare for people who can't afford it, that's some 30 million people, is apparently going to negatively affect the healthcare circumstances of 130 million people, negatively impacting more people than it helps. And this is where Republicans really, I believe, are perfectly happy to allow the implementation of the law to continue as it's currently constituted,
Okay, but explain that.
contrary to some belief.
Analyzed, specifically analyzed, how will 130 million people be negatively affected?
Well, what we've seen in the first initial parts of this rollout was the individual mandate being delayed dramatically for a whole swath of people who are they're trying to persuade to sign up. The individual market was decimated. The employer mandate has been postponed, and the business mandate has been postponed, so that the vast majority of people who get their coverage through their employer won't experience the kind of chaos that they were aware was going to happen in the individual market. The individual market is relatively small. We're talking about 15 million people, about 7 of which have lost their current coverage, and we're not sure whether or not they were able to replace it. Probably a lot more were unable to replace it than were able to replace it. The White House estimates 500,000. I've seen no estimate that's lower than 3 million outside of the White House. But that aside, we're talking about a very small chunk of the population. A vast majority of the population is going to be impacted when inevitably when the employer mandate kicks in and is no longer delayed, unless we delay it again, at which point the entire financial viability of this healthcare law is in doubt, and we'll have to very seriously contemplate a bailout for the insurance companies, which will be taking greater than 3% losses on the amount of people that they have to now newly insure.
But again, specifically, I just want to make it as clear as possible to the audience. When the employer mandate happens, how will 130 million people be negatively affected?
So there's some estimates as to how much the number will be. It's either 90 million, 100 million. It's in that range, or 130 million, or even more. And what's going to happen is that they're going to see the exact same thing that the individual market saw, which is that a lot of plans do not comport with current ACA requirements, coverage requirements, and that's part of the reason why so many people lost their plans in the individual market.
Right, but I think that here, so this is good that you're getting to that, because I think this is where we have a total disconnect. If somebody's plan is no longer a compliant plan, to say that that means they are being negatively affected is a huge stretch. First and foremost, every year plans come in and go out based on profitability to the insurance companies and other reasons. That already happens. So just someone's plan no longer being available isn't by definition negative, and it's also not by definition related to the Affordable Care Act, because regulations can change anyway. But the key problem I'm having with people that are making this argument is, over the long term, presumably, you're going to have a lower total yearly out of pocket. We had these so-called horror stories where someone's plan was no longer available. The plan they were, quote, forced into cost $40 more a month. If they had any more than one doctor's visit a year, they actually saved money under that plan. So just because someone's plan changes, I don't think we can say they've been negatively affected. Yeah, you've got to do some paperwork, I understand that, but you might have had to change your plan anyway.
Well, we can have the debate about whether or not it's appropriate for a young man of the age of 27 to be paying for maternity care in order to subsidize the cancer care of somebody who can't afford cancer care, which is essentially what we're asking people to do. Whether or not that's appropriate or not is a matter for the public sector, public sphere. We can have that debate. But it was a debate that we did not have in 2010. We were sold a position on this law that was actually aggressively litigated by this White House, that there would be only upsides, very few downsides. And anybody else who is forced into covering other people's care as a result of paying higher premiums with higher deductibles would not happen. It is happening. And it's coming as a shock to a lot of people, which is directly seen in the polls of the amount of people who are rejecting this law, rejecting the president, turning towards Republicans. People are shocked at what they are actually finding in the ACA, which was available publicly for anybody to see for 3 years.
It absolutely was. It absolutely was. But it's being drastically overblown in terms of the numbers, because when you look at the numbers, the very loud so-called horror stories, half of which are based on faulty information, another swath of which are based on people simply not understanding what they're doing and what their old plan was and what their new plan would be. Statistically speaking, you're not talking about more people being, quote, negatively affected than the number of new people who will have to get care. I think that this is where we're getting into the weeds, because these so-called horror stories are getting exponentially more attention than the successes. And this coming from me, I am not a huge fan of this, right? I think that single payer is the way to go. We've got to get this out of the for-profit industry altogether. I just don't know that the anti-narrative is that accurate right now.
I find it extraordinarily difficult to make the case that we're talking about the press, right? I mean, the only institution that gets coverage is the press. And I find it very difficult to make the case that the press should be focusing dramatically on the 30 million people, maybe on a good day. It's probably a lot less than that. We're talking actually about 2 million, according to the House, to the Department of Health and Human Services.
Yeah.
The amount of people who now have insurance that didn't have it before, or have gotten plans that they lost, for example, we're at 2 million. So the press should be focusing on those stories at the expense of the 7 million people who lost it. We're really talking about the press should be focusing on the minority of beneficiaries over the majority of people who have been negatively affected by the law.
Yeah, but no, that's kind of,
they lost coverage not as a result of their own actions. They lost coverage as a result of a government mandate, which they were either not aware of, some of them are not aware of it, or necessarily were not informed of the amount of things that it had to cover.
And,
so
and Noah, how many of those people who are losing their coverage weren't already told when they signed up for those plans after the passage of the Affordable Care Act, but before 2014, that those plans wouldn't be compliant, right? The idea that it was just this huge surprise, in part, we have to go back and say, well, hold on, the insurance companies knowingly offered and people knowingly signed up for plans in part that wouldn't be compliant. So I don't, my overall point is, yeah, go ahead.
Okay, well then we can go after, I'm sorry to interrupt you, but now we can go after the White House, because they're doing the exact same thing. They allowed extra legally over the course of the last week, insurance companies, whether they want, if they want to, if they don't want to, it's not enforceable, to allow catastrophic coverage plans.
Right. No, and I agree. I completely agree. I completely agree with you.
Addition to the law. So wait a minute. Either we allow these things, they're compliant, they're necessary, and people can buy them if they want them, or they're illegal and they can't be purchased. And there is no middle ground. But guess what? There's a real gray area now, and it's being enforced by the White House.
That I absolutely no disagreement.
Doing something that the White House is allowing.
Absolutely no disagreement with you there. I think it is a huge mistake to start hedging and going into the gray areas. There's so much more we could talk about. We didn't even get a chance to get into this entire issue of the of those who are being helped simply by not losing coverage as a 25 or 24-year-old, getting coverage until 26, the lifetime cap, pre-existing conditions, so many other issues. We obviously can't get to them today, though. Noah Rothman, editor at Mediaite, thanks so much for being on.